Does everyone know what Equifax is? Okay, because that's a really important thing to know. So for those who don't, Equifax, if you've ever had a loan, a credit card, a mortgage, anything like that, a school loan, then you are in Equifax's database. There's two basically credit bureaus in North America, TransUnion, Equifax. Equifax being the larger one. You are there if you have that. They have your social insurance number. They have all your past jobs. They have all your past addresses. They probably know my credit card balances more than I do right now if I was to log in. So Equifax was breached as well as Uber. How many? And I'm not going to make you guys answer some of these questions. I'm going to ask you some questions after. And just for security's sake, I don't want you guys to like raise your hands or anything. Just reflect on it and take it away. We're going to be really secure because we don't want someone to say, oh, that person from that company said their company is this. But basically, it was 204 million accounts. So 204 million customers. This table is rolling. There we go. Total, actually, that were breached. So it was 147 million of accounts from Equifax. I was caught up in it. Got it for free for the rest of my life. You too, yeah? So yay, us. But actually, it causes challenges when you go for new credit. You have to do extra authentication. And Uber was about 57 million. How did Uber claim that their data was accessed? So these are different types of security threats that could happen. Insider attack, DDoS, credentials left on a supplier's compromised system, packet sniffing. So it was actually through credentials left on a compromised system. This is something we're going to talk a lot about today. So the compromised system in this case was GitHub. Probably everyone here is using GitHub. Most people, yeah. So GitHub is amazing. It enables more open source development, faster development, sharing of code. If you're not using GitHub properly, which they do tell you how to use it properly, with multi-factor authentication, all of these different things, private repositories, don't let everyone sign up if you don't want. It can be compromised, and it has been in this case. And what had happened with Uber is somebody left authentication credentials on their software or in their software that was uploaded onto GitHub. The account got hacked, and then those credentials were used to then compromise or get the customer data from Uber. And we're going to talk quite a bit about how that happens and why that's important. And the Equifax, you guys probably infer the answer. It was entirely preventable, that breach. So what happened with Equifax was, remember I mentioned free open source software. Apache Struts, they were using Apache Struts, had a critical vulnerability, a CVE, that was highlighted. The recommendation from Apache was patch this within 48 hours because this is a critical vulnerability. They didn't patch it in time. It got exploited, and that's what happened. So managing supply chain management, which is the free open source, anything that comes into your software, we often think about security when we're talking about software as, oh, the code I write. But it's everything you're also including, all this free open source software, supply chain management, and this is one of the biggest landscapes for attack right now in current geopolitical situation, because everybody's using free open source software, and there's multiple layers of dependencies that you don't even know about. You include Apache Struts, and you probably get 500 more free open source softwares that are all linked to it. So that's what happened. There was an open source security report in 2019, and they said, well, we're going to talk a bit about it after, but about 78% of software vulnerabilities are through what you've included, like indirect dependencies, not actually the code you've written. Just a couple other stats. About 42% of external attacks are the vulnerabilities, and this is increasing exponentially every year. There's also internal attacks. And we think of internal attacks mostly as, oh, you've got someone maliciously doing something in the company. Yes, but it can also just be there was not a protection done that allowed someone to do something stupid that brought down your whole network. So that's also included in security vulnerabilities, even if it's not malicious. So it's a wide landscape of what can actually happen. Go back to my earlier point of look at defense in depth. That helps prevent a lot of those things. So the most sought after data from hackers, from malicious actors, is PII. So that's the personal identifiable information, authentication credentials, and IPR. Authentication credentials are what allow ransomware attacks. So they find credentials somewhere stored, unencrypted, plain text. They get them, they try to use them on different systems. They get access to the system, they take it over, they ask you for a lot of money if you're going to hand it back. This is happening increasingly to hospitals. It's one of the biggest targets. Cities, municipalities, like all of these things. The reason being targeted there is they're easier ways to attack there because generally they don't know software, they don't have big budgets, so things are often done without the full software mindset in mind, and they're a little bit more vulnerable. And when I say they and this, I mean everyone has to also realize this is not some hacker, the hoodie sitting there, right? This is all, they're using AI to do this. This is like a lot of times state sponsored. There's also like organized crime sponsoring these types of things. This is a very lucrative and also very impactful business. And so it really just increases what we need to do to protect ourselves. I showed you some stuff from like 2016, 2017. So talk about two that are more recent. Log4j or Log4Shell. So Log4j is a logging software. It's from Apache. If you are doing any logging in your software, anywhere, I guarantee you have this library somewhere. Probably multiple libraries of Log4j. So this happened in 2021, in December, right in time for the holidays. Was the biggest, it's debatable how you quantify biggest, but it's commonly recognized as the biggest free open source software vulnerability, CVE, that was ever found in terms of the impacts to mitigate it. So, and we'll talk about like the impacts of that and how you can actually make that a little bit easier on yourself. Because this will happen, this is gonna happen, right? It's normal in code that there will be vulnerabilities either maliciously put in, that's less normal, but just by accident. And then we find them, we patch them, and it should be okay. The problem is the patching. How hard is it for us to patch? How fast can we do it? Why didn't they patch the Apache struts at Equifax? Why wasn't that done? There's probably really good reasons why it wasn't. It probably wasn't easy for them to do it, and that's where DevOps comes in to help. The other one, I don't know if anyone's heard about this. This is fresh from last weekend. This, if you want to really have some nightmares, you can go read about this. So it's this XZUtil, free open source software that is in tons of Unix distributions, Linux distributions. And this has been, the reason it's scary is it's been a slow burn. Somebody, this person with, you don't know the name, you know the login credentials and what they're going under, but this person, who we don't know where they are in the world, nothing about them, has been contributing to open source projects very strategically for 3 or 4 years, to the point where they were able to take over the ownership of XZUtil and become the leader of the open source development community for that. At which point, after a few years, they were able to inject this malicious code, which gave a backdoor. Anyway, go read about it. And the fact that it was some Microsoft engineer happened to download it. He was wondering why one of his utilities was getting slow. He started to look, he's like, what is this? And that's how it was found, by accident. No one knows what they could have done with this, what they would have, but if you go read about it, maybe you'll have some nightmares. So I have to say, that I've made you really worried maybe, and my own paranoia, I'll just tell you, so this is my level of paranoia. I have a home garage door opener that could be hooked up to my Wi-Fi. I do not choose to hook it up to my Wi-Fi. I think the little old school toggle is pretty fine, or using the keypad, because why would I want somebody to be able, and this is, look, I work in this sector, so I have to have this healthy level of paranoia. And really, take a defense in depth approach, which is what are all the entries to my house and how can I really whatever. But this is the level because we are really exposed. So after saying all of that, maybe take a minute, and this is where I don't want you to raise your hands or identify, but think about this. Do you guys, where you work, if you're in software, do you have credentials that are stored in plain text somewhere in the source code, on Jira, Confluence, in a ticket? People are laughing, right? Unencrypted source code stored that someone could go get IP addresses with logins. Are some of those credentials for live systems? Have you disabled root access on all of your solutions? Like, are you guys regularly checking things like OWASP top 10, which is like a top 10 level of vulnerabilities that are pretty easy to check for and like scan automatically and know? And some of those are like the easiest ones. If you have one of those on your website, like something like cross-site scripting injection vulnerability, it's going to be found in a couple days. Like, not joking, because you have to think it's armies of scripts and bots that are just running and testing across. And then think about now, how are you integrating your free open source into your software? Are you guys just pulling stuff from the internet? Do you have like in-house, systems with the binaries that you're pulling from there, they've been certified and maybe signed and they're safe? How are you upkeeping them when you get CVEs? Do you pay attention to the CVEs? All of these types of things. Because remember, I just told you, a lot of those vulnerabilities were from open source, free open source, and that's increasing like almost day by day. Some other things for people who work in cloud or containerization are using minimized OSs like Alpine, or you're just putting like someone just installing the whole OS, all the ports open, you're putting that out on the cloud. There's a lot of things to consider. So after I've made you a little bit depressed or like maybe it's dystopian future, what does it have to do with DevOps? So this is from the State of DevOps report. If anyone really wants to know anything about, I call it State of Software, of good software practices. This report has been coming out every year since about 2013. It's really great they have amazing insights, recommendations, metrics you can take and everything like that. But basically, good security practices and better security outcomes are enabled by DevOps practices. So if you want to improve your security, improve your DevOps. This is where I said at the beginning, my title says DevSecOps. I often just call it DevOps because I think you can't have proper DevOps without security. Security for me is just another quality metric. It's a special quality metric, but really if you're doing software well, if you're doing DevOps well, then you have the security automated, the compliance and all those things at the same level as you would have function tests, unit tests, end-to-end tests, all of those types of things. So then what is DevOps? Okay, well, that's another real fun. Anyone who knows the Princess Bride movie will know that quote. But basically, we keep using that word, right? I don't think we know what it means. So what does DevOps mean? I could ask probably everyone in the room, and everyone's going to have a slightly different answer. Some people are going to say, oh, it means you write Ansible scripts. Someone else is going to say, yeah, it's a role. Someone else is going to say, oh, they do support. And then someone might say, well, it's a practice, the cultural and technology practices that enables better flow in your software delivery. That would be the better answer. But we use the word really differently depending on the company we're coming from, how the company implements it, and everything like that. So for this purpose, we're going to talk about, when I talk about DevOps or DevSecOps, it means you're using agile practices, you're delivering better software faster through automation, and that you're improving collaboration between your operations team or your support team or whatever you call it, and your infrastructure and your development teams. So it's really like this full responsibility and accountability, end-to-end good communication, but using huge levels of automation to achieve it. I talk sometimes about integrity. I always kind of put an asterisk. For me, what I call integrity is quality, security, privacy, compliance. It's the integrity of your software. So DevOps is really great at enabling flow. It means you get your features faster to the market, which means you're getting more money, hopefully. People want your feature, increases your top line. This is the goal of every company. Get the stuff out faster. We don't get it out faster with quality, well then we start eating the technical debt, and then we slow down the system, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of like this. What happens with security though? When you start to do DevOps really well, if you don't integrate security into your DevOps flow, yeah, it's all great, because has everyone heard about the DevOps unicorns? So that's like kind of like, the companies who are really doing software well, that have amazing flow and all this, they're putting software out faster. Maybe it's with quality, but if you leave security behind, this is what's going to happen if you don't put DevSec and SecOps into your pipelines. So, development practices are evolving. As they've evolved, quality security silos have had to come down by necessity. And it's the same with the responsibility for quality is now shared. The same thing with security. It's now shared across. This is a really key enabler. In the past, or even probably in the present, there's a lot of companies that will have that now. You kind of have a security team, whether it's like it could be an ops security team or like security, architects or something, but they're often outside of the development teams. And so they're out here and the developers are down here, and the developers don't know that much maybe about the security. And if they only come yelling when there's like a problem or they can't release because they found something. So what we want to do in typical DevOps fashion is we want to bring that knowledge and bring it down here so that we can scale. And that, yes, there's always going to be a need for security expertise. There's always going to be a need for, just like architects, there will always be a need for architects, right? Software architects. But you need to democratize as much as possible that information and that responsibility and accountability down to where the actual flow of the work is happening. So this is all DevOps principles. So there's really 5 DevOps practices that really affect the security posture positively, not poorly. So security and development teams collaborate on threat models. So when you're starting development, before development, writing like the requirements, the epics, user stories, whatever you're using, the security experts will help in the development teams to say, what are the potential threats to this? You know, how could this be attacked? How could it be compromised? And they do it collaboratively together up front. So again, the key concept of DevOps that you've probably heard, this isn't supposed to be a DevOps thing, but is shift left. You shift the things left as much as possible so they can be done earlier in the software development lifecycle where it's cheaper and it scales better. It's no different with security. So doing the threat modeling earlier. Security tools are integrated into the development integration pipeline, and we're going to go into the pipeline and where you can implement something actionable for you guys to take away. Security requirements, functional and non-functional, are prioritized as part of the product backlog. DevOps is about agile, should have a proper product backlog. It should be prioritized. This is business. This is not just features. This is business. If you want to release a product that is secure, it's one thing to release stuff with no quality. You will eat your technical debt and you will slowly not be profitable. And it's no different from security. So they need to be prioritized. They need to be not an afterthought, and they need to be done as part of the product backlog. Same thing with infrastructure-related security. This is really important. It depends what type of industry you're in, but probably most people here are actually delivering to a live system, not handing it over to a customer who then puts it in their network. I don't know, I'm just taking some guesses. But basically, before deploying, that there's some infrastructure-related security policies that they're reviewed. This is a bit more of a GitOps part, and reviewed could be hopefully automated, right? Policy management can be automated. These things can be automated. It doesn't mean there's a security person, you know, with like kind of the tie and a clipboard saying yes, check, or no, it's not going. It's really like we want to take automated decisions. And then again, security experts evaluate automated tests. So one of the things, and also changes in high-risk areas of the code. So if you have authentication classes, let's say, that you're doing your own authentication, someone's going in to change that, right? Then you might want, depending on how you've scaled your security, to have a security expert come and look at that code, somebody who's more knowledgeable than maybe the collective knowledge of the team itself. The goal would be that the collective knowledge in the team over time, with mentoring from security people, would be enough to do that themselves, but there's always going to be cases where it's, you know, there's a narrow set of knowledge that's needed. So let's go to the pipeline then. I guess probably anyone who knows anything about DevOps has seen sort of this infinity wheel. It's really great. It's basically meaning that you're continuously doing these things. It's not linear. I'm showing you this now because I'm going to have to lie it out linear after to show you how to do something, but this is the goal, right? This is all continuous. It's continuous feedback, continuous deployment, continuous loops, continuous testing. So where can you build security in? So we talked about the threat modeling and things like that. So identifying the next most critical security risk in your software. So that can be done at the planning phase. Like I said, when you're doing the threat modeling, you're planning the feature. Do you need to add actually a security feature? If you have login, well, we got to get authentication. How are we going to, what encryption are we going to use? All these things. When you're operating, you can detect attacks and mitigate attacks. So this is like just going through the DevOps pipeline. Verification, continuous security testing, just like you can do continuous quality testing, you should be doing continuous security testing. You can do it in both phases, by the way. You can do it in the internal CI part, but you can also do it on, and probably should do it on your external part too. And then, implement a defense strategy, like at the code level. I'm going to go into laying it out. What does that mean when we lay it out, though? So that's why I wanted to show the infinity wheel first before I showed you something that looks like waterfall. This is not waterfall. That's my disclaimer. But so different tools here for code and build phase. You should be doing automated security testing in your CI pipeline. So you can be doing SAST and DAST. So that's a static and dynamic code testing, application security testing. You could be building security function tests. So if you're developing something that needs to have extra security function tests done on it, you should be developing those in the development team, maybe with the support of an external security expert. And you should be doing FOSS auditing. We went back, I'll go back to that all the time. So FOSS auditing means at code time, you're a developer, you say, Let's pick log4j. I need a logging solution. I'm including this solution right here. When I go, ideally, there are tools that it can show in the browser that, hey, you included something that either is not the latest patch level or it doesn't meet a licensing requirement of your company or something like that. That's the ideal and the beautiful thing. Some of those tools are expensive, but at the very least, at build time or at commit time, you should be scanning to see that you have the latest patched software and that you haven't violated any, and we can talk briefly about the licensing after, any of your company's licensing agreements. Let's skip, we should skip, maybe go back to planning stage. We talked about that, the risk assessments and the threat modeling when you're doing your agile planning. So then your tests, so automated compliance and vulnerability testing in the pipeline then. So this is kind of like in your CI as you're coding and building, here's your continuous testing. You can be doing compliance verification, whatever that compliance might be for your company. It might be static code analysis. It could be, anyway, it depends really on what your company is trying to comply against or with. Security and policy requirement verification, and you can do vulnerability scanning at this stage. I'm purposely not going into any specific tools because there's a range of free and commercial, going from free to highly expensive tools that do all of these things, and I kind of don't want to push any of them, but you can take a look and you can find everything from free to expensive commercial tools to do a lot of these things. Automated security and operations, so you want to be scanning to make sure, what ports do you have open? Do you have a port open that shouldn't be open and that's easily compromised? You could be doing TLS, SSL scanning, the SIM, which I told you was the event monitoring, the incidents response, and a blue team. I won't go into the blue team, red team. You guys can look, or purple teams now. There's purple teams too. You guys can look that up. But that's what you would do in the operate area. And the monitoring, again, so penetration testing, and a great way to do penetration testing if it works for your company is to do something like a bug bounty program. So you can hire pen testers and you can get like 1 or 2, or you could go with a bug bounty program, which they cost money, but then you get access to, it's basically crowdsourcing pen testing. And there's some very reliable, reputable companies that do this. And there's all ways that they check the hackers, the ethical hackers that work for them, et cetera, et cetera. It can get expensive though, those programs. So basically this is how the tools and the activities build into the DevOps pipeline from a security. So this is the DevSecOps part of the DevOps. Some cultural enablers to do this, because again, like it's one thing to have the tools, if no one's ever looking at the vulnerability scans or no one's fixing them or no one's whatever, then it doesn't matter. You can have all the tools, it's just gonna be data that's not getting fixed. So all software devs should have a basic level of security training at the very least, something like secure coding. They should know what OWASP Top 10 is if they're delivering anything with a web interface. And a lot of this stuff could be found online for free, this training. A lot of the companies or the organizations, let's say, because they're not all companies, some of them are like nonprofit organizations, whatever, can point you to a lot of free training for some things like this, even free testing tools. But developers really need to be aware of security, especially if they're developing anything that goes out to an external interface. Shared security responsibilities mean that you might still have those security, and you need them. We need experts. Right? This is the thing with Agile is like, we kind of lost this idea at some point. No, everyone's just a developer. Everyone just has to be a developer. And that's great, but people will have areas of expertise that we need. And so security is one of those areas. But the security professionals in the organization have to work with the development teams. They have to mentor them. They have to coach them. They have to invest time in order for that knowledge to be scaled. From my experience, what we do is and this is a model that's like, not, it's a known model, is in a team, kind of like a scrum master. You appoint somebody to be responsible for the security in that agile team. They might have zero security knowledge. Maybe the whole team has zero security knowledge. But what happens is your security professional or professionals mentor that person in that team. And if you have 10 teams, there's one from each team. And over time, they mentor them. Over time, they get more knowledge. And then that person's in the team also then somehow socializing the team to security things. It takes about 2 years for that person to become intermediate level competent in security. So it's not a fast ramp up, but in 2 years, now you've got 10 more security people. You've developed 10 more security people, and your security expert isn't working on things like free open source software and showing them how to fix a CVE or why a CVE is important to fix. And they're actually working on really like more complex problems and using the expertise. And the teams are able to be self-sufficient. We love that. DevOps flow makes them flow faster with integrity. Something like a security community of practice or a guild can be effective to have people who are interested in that from the teams, whether it is the group of people that are identified or more people can come and share knowledge as much as possible. And again, security is just like any other quality metric. You need to find the right balance for the business. So I'm not standing here saying that security should stop everything. It's always a business decision and a business risk, because you're always going to have some security problems, just like you're going to have quality problems. No software ever is perfect. You need to make it perfect for your business and for your risk tolerance. And that's the reality. So the more information you have, the more strategic decisions you can take that are data-based. They're data-driven decisions. Like we know, like some people get really worried when you start to say, oh, we have like this many security vulnerabilities and this many are critical and this many, and people just like, but it's like, no, but this is actionable. Because now you can say, we're only going to fix the top 3 we analyzed, and the rest, we know they're there, we'll fix them over time, whatever. But it's actionable. It's better to know than to kind of like, keep it under the, I liken it to like having a credit card statement that you never look at. Money's still there and it's accumulating interest. Just because you don't look at it doesn't make it go away. And this is the thing with security. So security needs to become, and in the past it hasn't always been like that. It's been a little bit more guarded and protected, and we shouldn't talk about that. It's only these people. And that's really changed, especially over the past 13 years, with the need to scale, and then this understanding that it needs to be democratized. It needs to be everyone's responsibility to ensure the security of the software. Because otherwise we can't do it. We will not scale to meet the new world of challenges. So in parting, if you could just do one thing if you take one thing away, I'm going to ask you to take more things, but one, if you remember this, go read about that and think about how you're integrating free open source software into your products. Think about how fast can you patch that software. If you guys had this XZ util in your software today, live in production, and you found out today, how fast is that going to be for you to roll up the upgrade for the patch? Is it going to be, think about your CI pipeline, if you even have one. Some people might not. Think about your testing. Think about all the doors it might have to go through to get released onto production. Is that a 1-hour fix? Is that a 2-day fix? Is that a 1-week fix? Is that 6-month fix? And think about what happened to Equifax. It's the same thing, 48 hours to fix a vulnerability. They didn't fix it and they got hacked. If you have a critical CVE that's out there live, it will be found. It will be found. These are bots continuously running, looking for anything that's open. So very important. If you take anything away, look at your free open source software usage, because this is the next real threat landscape, or it's the now, but it's even increasing more. So like I said, 78% of overall software vulnerabilities are actually in the free open source software integration. It's called, like I said, it's called supply chain hacking. Your supply chain is like how you get that software in. There's many ways to protect against it. Even we've learned that, anyway, I won't even give you those statistics, but if you go and look at about how much open source software that's out there and what percentage of it has actually malicious code that's been delivered into it and not found, it's quite frightening. So it's really important to have a free open source software policy. And if your company doesn't and you're not doing this, if you take anything back, please take that back. It's pretty, I don't want to say it's easy, but there's a lot of tools there that you could get that kind of visibility fast on what's going on, how vulnerable you are, and then you need to think about patching those vulnerabilities. The next part, which I'm not going to cover, so the IPR risk, I just want to throw that in too. So when you use free open source software, it's not just the security vulnerabilities, it's also the licensing. So there's many different types of licensing that these are under. If you use something called a copyleft license, I'll let you guys look that up. All of this software comes with some licensing. Some is extremely permissive. Take it, do whatever you want, I don't care, whatever. Copyleft licenses are. If you put this source code in your software, then we actually own that intellectual property of that code, everything you put it into. So this could, if you're a startup and you're like launching something and you have IPR, like licensing that is a copyleft license, and you've included that code, your entire startup can be at risk legally. Just to tell you, when software companies acquire, or larger companies acquire other software companies, they check for this. They check all of the open source software that's used, and they check all of the licensing to make sure that they don't go and buy a company or the software bring it in-house, and then suddenly someone claims, yeah, but they used my license and I own that software. It happens, and it's something to be really careful about. So it's not just the vulnerabilities, it's also your IPR risks. Disastrous for a startup. Disastrous, right? And by the way, there's people who go around just looking for that. They literally scan your code looking for that. And then they'll come to you and say, give me $50,000, I won't sue you. Or 100,000 or whatever. So it's serious stuff. So maybe just quickly, key takeaways. Shared responsibility. If you don't embrace some of the best practices, it's going to have impacts. Major legal business consequences for you, and impacts on your customers, impacts on us. When we use this software, I'm forever impacted by Equifax. Forever, right? Forever. People have my SIN number. They have all kinds of data about me. So it's extra hurdles in my life that I have to go through now for the rest of my life because of, now, it's not poor me. It's like, there's like 147 million of us. But it can be very impactful. What if someone gets into your bank account and drains it? Right now, banks will protect a lot of that. It's going to happen in the future. Like, we don't know. What if they drain the whole bank? What if they take over the whole bank and hold everything hostage? Can't get your money out. Culture tooling practices enable you to scale. And there's lots of great tools and technologies out to support you. So you should take a look at all of them. So thank you.